think we are, video-wise.
All set, Mr. Mayor.
All right, so we're going to call the meeting of the Board of Public Works to order on March 24th. Our first item is the roll call, and I believe Director Foto will do that.
Sure. Commissioner Moriarty?
Here.
Commissioner Schoeneman?
Here.
Commissioner Lemon?
Here.
Commissioner Shea?
Here.
Mayor Donches?
Here, and we've also got our liaison, Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you.
The first motion is to approve the agenda. Commissioner Shea.
I would like to motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Any discussion?
I'll just point out the only amendment to this agenda is item M under engineering. We had a poll license petition that came in last minute that we've added to the agenda. That's the only change.
And we're working off the so-called
The goldenrod copy, correct.
Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next item has to do with the minutes of the last meeting. Commissioner Lemon.
Motion to approve the minutes of the Board of Public Works meeting of February 24th, 2022.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Public comment. Is there any member of the public who wishes to address the Board of Public Works? Please come forward. Sherry Dutsey, head of the Conservation Commission.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me all right with the mask?
Yes.
I just wanted to come up and
But
first of all-
technically,
I'm sorry,
please, your name
introduce
and address.
myself. Sherry Dutsey, 18 Swart Terrace, Chair of the Nashua Conservation Commission. And I am here to extend an invitation to the DPW to work more closely with the Conservation Commission, especially around any issues that might have to do with wildlife habitat, such as beavers and flooding that might occur with beavers who are blocking culverts. I think more likely when that happens, it comes to the DPW rather than coming to the Conservation Commission. And we would like to work more closely with you in terms of how we can create a situation that is a win-win for both the public, the DPW, and for the beavers. And in particular, there was a great webinar that just happened, that just occurred. A gentleman over in Grafton, Vermont, who has spent his lifetime in terms of developing beaver deceivers. And it's, they're very customized to the situation, but it works out that it's a benefit for increasing wetlands. It works out so that the beavers don't get killed. And it turns out that beaver deceivers are much more cost-effective in terms of remedying beavers from coming back and creating dams and lodges where we don't want them. So that's just one issue, but I just wanted to come and I wanted to say that, and if there are things that come up at the DPW, please feel free to contact us, and we'd like to get together and work together more closely.
All
Okay?
right. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other members of the public wish to address the board? Yes.
Hello, good afternoon. Everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. My name is Vincent Davis. I'm the Director of Property Operations for NHCG LLC here in Nashua, New Hampshire. And I'm here speaking in support of the Engineering Department's Motion C, which would approve a trailblazing sign package on Board Street leading from Exit 6 off the F.E. Everett Turnpike to business along Gooseville Avenue, along with the stipulations. Any questions?
Well, often if you are on one of the issues, one of the items, we would call you up and ask you any questions
Okay.
if there's anything in that context. Because we'll have the engineering department address the issue, and then thank you for coming. And so if there's any issues or questions, we can ask you then.
Excellent, appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else wish to speak to the board? Next, Board of Aldermen referrals. We have R-22-013. Commissioner Shoneman.
I recommend a positive referral authorizing the mayor and the city treasurer to issue bonds not to exceed $6,208,325 for the city's sewer infrastructure program and sewer structures.
And I believe Mr. Hudson is going to address this.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dan Hudson, City Engineer. So this is the annual sewer bond that we request. And this funds pretty much all of our sewer work. So it's the collection system work. We do a dig program where we dig and replace a certain amount of pipe each year that's in severe disrepair.
Excuse me, Mr. Hudson, can
Yes.
you move your microphone up? It's a little hard to hear.
I mumble too, so yeah, there you go.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do I need to repeat
That's
any of
fine.
that? Okay. And then this also helps fund the CCTV work and the pipe lining work, which if we, we look at a lot of pipe, and if it's in good enough condition, we line it, and that saves having to do that dig operation, which is very expensive. And then funds other things as well. We have a sewer siphons that we had investigated. We need to line those. So it's a variety of different things in the sewer system that this funds each year. So, and it's basically it's kind of indexed for inflation. It goes up 3% every year to try to keep up with inflation. So, I'm happy to address any questions.
Any discussion, questions?
If I may.
Yeah, of course.
Can we be doing more? Are we doing a satisfactory amount of tending to the sewers? I know that we have a lot of aged infrastructure. What's your perspective on that?
We are doing a good amount right now. Probably at this level, that's probably about what we can, manage, I guess, if you want to say. I mean, $6 million a year is a good-sized program. But yeah, we do still have a lot of pipe to look through. We prioritized it. We started with the oldest pipe. Some pipes fare worse over time than other types. So we've been looking at those types of pipes and aged pipes. But we're still working our way through the system. We're maybe a third of the way through. Some of these pipes haven't been looked at probably in 100 years. So as part of the program, we clean them. So that helps with the flow capacity as well. And then we find those problems and try to solve them before they could become bigger problems. But no, I think we're doing a good job. The city's taken on a lot of projects. There's always projects at the wastewater treatment plant, of course, and then we're rehabilitating some pump stations and things. Those are kind of separately funded, but this is primarily the collection system, and I think we're on track and doing a good job with it. So I'm happy with the level of effort we're putting forward right now.
Good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Shoneman.
This bond is for just fiscal year 22, 23. Do you recall what the budget was last year?
I don't have the exact number, but it would have been
Okay.
3% less.
Oh,
So
man.
yeah, I mean 3%'s a good chunk of change each year that it keeps increasing. But again, we're trying to keep up with inflation. But yeah, it's in a similar neighborhood.
And how did we do in that budget?
We're doing well. We have a sewer contract ready to go. We need this bond. You'll see it's conditional upon this bond being approved because we have used up the funding that we had. Excuse me. So yeah, we do need this to keep going.
So last year's was probably around, let's say, 5-ish million,
Correct.
and we're asking for another 2 million on top of that to finish later. We're asking for 2 million, so it's going to be more like 7 million to finish this fiscal year. Is that right?
Excuse me. Later when?
Later in this agenda, the contract.
The dig contract is funded by this. The contract with SUR West
Yes.
on the engineering, yeah,
And,
that's contingent upon approval. This will be funded by this.
Okay, so that'll be funded.
So it's not additional, it's part of
pending
this.
approval of this.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
And this also needs to be approved by the Board of Aldermen. So that's why so what we're really doing is only the Board of Aldermen needs to approve any debt. So we are considering whether to make a recommendation to them that we go forward.
What were you saying before? I couldn't really hear about CCTV.
Yeah, CCTV is closed circuit television is what it stands for, but basically we run a camera through the pipe. Before we do that, we jet the pipe to clean it, get the debris out. That camera, we visually inspect the pipe. We don't want to see anything wrong, but we see cracks. We see sometimes we run into a spot the pipe may have collapsed or partially collapsed. That's the type of thing that we, maybe it's still flowing, but it's like a time bomb waiting to happen, right? Because eventually that's going to fully collapse, and then we're going to have a sinkhole in the street that we got to deal with. So it's important to get a look at these pipes, especially the ones that are suspect because of age and material. And then we can target repairs. We're lining about a third of the pipes we look in, actually, but it sounds like a high percentage, but you got to understand we are looking at the oldest pipes, worst condition pipes, so we would expect to do a fair percentage. But that's also a good thing because that means we're taking care of those pipes before we have to dig up a street to fix them because they've fallen into worse condition. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Seeing, I know this is going to come up very shortly to the Board of Aldermen for their review, but basically, yes, it is a large dollar amount, but this is actually going to save millions to the taxpayer, because if we had, or let this go, let the infrastructure fail, the cost of replacement would supersede what we're asking for on this dollar amount. So this is actually a cost-cutting, preventative maintenance. Absolutely, you need to do it to keep the infrastructure as a whole.
Yes, I agree with that. That's a good characterization. Basically, you're building a pipe within the pipe. So once you've done this, it's as good as if you'd replace that pipe, but it's much easier to do because you're not digging the street. You're just putting this liner in, and it can be 20 times as expensive to dig it up and do it that way. So yes, in the long run, this will be very cost beneficial to the city.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We'll move on to the Solid Waste Department. We have item A, Commissioner Moriarty.
I move to approve the purchase of recycling and trash carts and cart lids for curbside collection for FY22 in an amount not to exceed $145,000 from Toter Inc. of Statesville, North Carolina. Funding will be through Department 168 Solid Waste, Fund Solid Waste, Account Classification 71 Equipment.
Mr. LaFleur?
Jeff LaFleur, Superintendent, Solid Waste. This is my annual appropriation for cart replacement, repairs, that type of stuff. Our toters are now 19 years old. They're only expected to last us 15 years, so we're doing really well with them. I always try to keep a stock of 1,500 of each in stock at the landfill for repairs or anything in case of major breakdown in the toters that are out on the public. We have about 22,000 of them out there, so we want to make sure that we have enough to replace whatever, may break down over the year.
Commissioner Schoeneman.
The memo says that the committee that decided to purchase from this vendor reviewed the purchase in 2002. If you're like me, it's hard to process that was a full 20 years ago. Any bids or revisions, anything that might make you consider that looking at other possible vendors?
We could possibly look at other vendors, but we're trying to stay with commonality, so some of the parts from the other vendors wouldn't fit these toters. Mm-hmm. That's why when we went out to bid, we used them as our preferred, company to build these. Our trucks are all set up to use these specific toters, so we'd have to take dimensions and make sure that everything would match with each other. They've been very, consistent with their pricing since 2002. They haven't really skyrocketed in pricing, so they've been very fair with the city of Nashua. In order to change out every toters or switch to a different brand, it could cost $3 or $4 million, to replace all the toters. And that's one of the reasons why the city never went forward to giving out recycling carts, because of the cost. It could cost us $3 million to hand out recycling carts. So now if residents want them, they could just buy them at cost, actually a little bit lower than cost.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Moriarty.
Yes, on that note, Superintendent, the money that comes in from purchasing the cart, where does that money go?
That goes directly into the general fund. So the general funds appropriates money to the solid waste department, so there's not like a specific fund for toters. It just goes right into the general fund.
So that money doesn't come back to your department?
No,
for
I
purchase.
budget this through my budget every year. So I put $145,000 in my budget, anticipating that, we'll make most of it back.
And how much would you, yearly, how much would you pull in for the carts?
It's tough to say. I sell about 100 toters, 200 toters a month, but that's starting to slow down because more and more residents are buying them. So it's hard for me to give you a definite number that we sell each year. It's more for the repairs. We don't charge residents for repairs or replacements of the trash barrels. And like I said, those are starting to get very old. And when they break down, I have to replace them. So that comes out of my budget.
So is it almost a wash then? Is that the money that comes in? It kind of comes back?
Yeah. I don't always spend the full $145,000. Like I said, I try to keep a replacement tractor trailer full at the landfill of 1,000 to 1,500 every year. So I never fully use the $145,000, but it's there in case I have this catastrophic event where I have to buy 2 or 3 tractor trailer loads at once to replace, 1,000, 2,000 carts.
Great. Thank you.
Anyone else? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We now have the Street Department, an informational item. I think it's pretty self-evident. It's press release. Anybody have questions or comments on that? Commissioner Shea.
So this is for like street cleaning, and do the street cleaners ever go out and do like a second pass? I feel like in the first pass, a lot of times the machine gets overfilled or what have you, and there's a lot of like additional, like a trail left behind. Is that something that the department keeps an eye on, and is that something that happens?
Yes, that's a good question. So they will be starting in the spring, and they have their routes. So they do similar routes every week. So they would be doing multiple passes in different areas. Yes.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right, thank you. Okay, we'll go on to Park Rec. We have item A. Commissioner Shea.
The motion is to approve the abolishment of one groundsman 1 position and create one groundskeeper maintenance position at the Parks and Recreation Department.
This is just an opportunity to allow.
But you should introduce yourself. I'm
Sorry, Mayor.
I think this is his first time.
Brian Conant, Superintendent of Parks and Recs. How is everybody? Mayor, Commissioners. In the groundskeeper / maintenance position, you were exposed to more in the city, and the opportunity gives you a bigger chance to gain institutional knowledge with the various different aspects of our Parks Department. That's really what I'm after. If you look at some of our staff, they are close to retirement. So I think this would allow the individual, a new individual, to come in and gain that knowledge, which I think is going to be very important moving forward. So that's what I'm trying to accomplish here.
All right, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much. Wastewater Department, item A is, as you can see, user warrants. Commissioner Lemon.
Motion is to approve the user warrants as presented.
Any discussion or questions there? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item B, Commissioner Shoneman.
I move to approve the contract with Wright Pierce to provide design plans and specifications for a second digester heat exchanger and a stair tower exhaust fan in an amount not to exceed $40,900. Funding for this contract will be through Department 169 wastewater, Fund wastewater, activity heat exchanger, primary digester.
Mr. Boucher?
Thank you, Mayor. Dave Boucher, wastewater superintendent. The wastewater facility purchased a second heat exchanger for our 1.3 million gallon primary digester for redundancy purposes. This motion is to hire Wright Pierce to do the engineering work, the design phase, which includes the plumbing, some of the containment structure, controls. Also in here, we have an exhaust fan and a stairwell that leads to that heat exchanger. It's a very tall stairwell, over 70 feet, and on the top of the roof, it has an exhaust fan. We can't reach it, maintenance crew can't reach it, we can't maintain it, it's just in a bad location. So Wright Pierce is going to design moving it to the side of the building. We do have a catwalk at that elevation, which would make it more accessible for maintenance purposes. So, can I answer any questions?
Commissioner Shoneman.
Thank you for providing a summary of the staff hours and costs that's associated with this motion. I had a question about one of the items.
Yep.
Can we talk about that? Everything is pretty well laid out and totaled at the bottom of each grid, but there's an entry for indirect labor that's part of the cost. I can see where the direct labor and the non-labor and the subcontractor and those things, where those fees are totaled up, but the indirect labor isn't part of the grid. Can you explain what indirect labor is, and because it's a significant cost?
Is this on the fee schedule?
Yes, that looks like this.
Sorry, I got the small printed one.
I know.
There you go.
I hear you. So they're totaled at the bottom of each grid: direct labor, indirect labor, non-labor, subcontractor, et cetera. Indirect labor is not in the grid, and I was just curious what that was, if you knew.
I apologize, I'm not seeing it,
It's down at
just
the-
because it's tiny type.
Do you-
But indirect labor would, I'm assuming would be for things that are not directly involved. I don't know if there's administrative cost in here, office fees, I'm not sure. I can't read my page, so I can't see.
You can loan you my
Direct.
progressives.
Yeah. Sorry. I didn't print it out landscape, I printed it out.
Okay, I was just curious.
Portrait-wise.
Since it's a significant portion of the cost, I was curious what that might entail.
I can find out specifically
Okay,
and get back to you.
yeah, it's in both the digester and the stairway cost. So be it.
All right, so we've left it that Mr. Boucher is going to come back with an explanation?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, it says provide a small allowance for assistance with bidding and construction. I'm not sure if it's that. Oh, thanks.
So I think there's a $7,000 number? Indirect labor down near the bottom? Is that specifically what the question is related to?
Yeah,
So all of the labor costs
Or-
are in the fee schedule.
It's really a function of how they've broken this down, which is a little bit different than I'm used to seeing too, but I
Yeah.
think what they're doing is the direct labor costs are all the labor to work on the project, and then what they're calling indirect are subs and equipment they may need and other indirect costs like the project manager, the project engineer, those things. I'd have to add them up, but I think that's what they're doing here. I think that's the way they've broken it down. But we can get back to you for sure.
Okay.
The overhead
Yeah,
cost.
sorry to put you on the spot. I was just curious.
Yeah.
Because it's such a significant portion, I was just curious.
Yeah, I think it is a little bit of a strange way to itemize
Every
it.
project has
Honestly, yeah.
more going on than just the
Yep.
staff salary.
Director, can I?
Yeah, I can see.
So
You can.
it's, this is a typical format for, that I'm familiar with from like DOT type of projects. Direct labor is what the employee actually gets paid. The indirect is all the other company overhead and everything, profit and everything that is on top of that. Maybe not profit, but all the company overhead. And this is pretty typical. What you see is direct labor is typically like around a third of what the total cost is. So instead of billing somebody out, say at $20 an hour, they're billing them out at $60 an hour. Or they're building the direct labor is 20, but the company costs and everything else that they incur as a business is that additional amount.
So that's tagged
Some
on as
contracts, they
indirect
bake
labor.
it all into the rate, so it's just like one rate and everything's in there. In this case, they've broken it out. It's what the individual gets paid, and then the company overhead stuff is separated. So
Okay.
that's my understanding of it. So.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Sorry about that. Thanks.
All right, any other comments or questions? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much. Now we have engineering. First, item A is the sewer service permits. Commissioner Moriarty.
I move to approve the sewer service permits and fees as submitted.
All right, any comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Item B, Commissioner Shea.
The motion is to approve drain slayer's license for Basco Excavating LLC of Nashua, New Hampshire, in accordance with Nashua City Code 255-19, issuance of drain slayer's license, and authorize the Division of Public Works to temporarily suspend the license if work is found to be unsatisfactory during an initial 6-month probationary period.
Dan Hudson, City Engineer. So as noted, this is a application we received for Basco Excavating. We checked their references, 3 references, 2 of them which were municipal officials, and they said that they had performed successfully. So we find the package satisfactory. We did note that they're a fairly new company. The principals of the company have been in business for 30 years. They have a lot of experience, but for that reason, we requested this ability to temporarily suspend them if necessary during a probational period.
Anyone? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Item C, Commissioner Lemon.
I motion to approve a trailblazing sign package on Broad Street leading from exit 6 of the F.E. Everett Turnpike to businesses along Gusabelle Avenue with stipulations.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. So this, I'll briefly introduce this, and I understand we have representatives here that can address specific questions, but New Hampshire DOT runs a sign logo program where there's signs on the interstate, and so you know to exit there to go for whatever it is that's on the sign. But you really need to get routed from there to the actual business. So that's what this request is for, is to place a post and some signs in the right-of-way, basically blazing the trail from the off-ramp to the businesses. If this is approved, we added some stipulations that we would request the board add as a condition of approval. And that's that, they install the signs on the interstate first, or turnpike first, that the design of the signs be approved by the Director of Public Works, that they're fully responsible for designing them, erecting them, replacing them, taking them down, all that sort of thing. And I think that was it. I had 4, but I kind of combined a couple. So. with that, if there's questions, I'd turn it over to the applicants.
Okay. Questions? Comments? Yes, Commissioner Moriarty.
I was just wondering, it says the sign package, I mean, how many signs are we talking about?
Okay, so my understanding is that there's 3 signs. There's the Lucky Moose Casino, Denny's, and Wendy's. So there's 3 signs on a post with an arrow underneath saying, take a left here to go to those businesses.
So it's one post? That's what I meant.
That's my understanding. 1 post with those 3 signs, and attached to the memo is a sketch which kind of shows a rendering of that. Typical sign size, but basically 3 stack signs.
Yeah, I have that, but, right, so there's nothing on the Everett, because that's not our jurisdiction, correct? So this is our jurisdiction because it's off of Broad, and,
Correct. On the Everett, there'll be one of the bigger blue signs or whatever it is, and they'll have the logos for the businesses that will say, go this way. But that's not what you're approving. You're approving the one sign assembly that will be in the right-of-way near Goosebell Ave.
So from prior cases, I think the situation is that this can't be done unless the DOT approves a sign on the turnpike. When that happens, then they want this so that when people get off as directed from the turnpike, they know where to go. So it's, without the turnpike sign, this wouldn't be
thank you.
before us. Fair to say, I think?
Yes.
Yes.
And it's conditional upon the turnpike thing going ahead, right?
Yeah, and when if for whatever reason they part ways with that program, then we would expect them to remove the sign. They go hand in hand, so that's the intent.
Discussion. Commissioner Shea.
Has there been any additional communication about signage from the northbound? I'm just surprised to see only the southbound approach. Is that correct, in my understanding of this?
Maybe the applicant could speak better. I don't know where the signs are going to go on the turnpike. It is written up as southbound to here.
Yep.
Whether you're coming from the northbound or the southbound ramp, you would still make the same left turn on the Goosebell Ave. So in effect, this approval, it doesn't matter if it's northbound, southbound in terms of approving this sign. But I don't know. I don't know if there's going to be signs on the turnpike for both directions or not.
Okay.
So the applicant is here and may be able to answer that question?
Yes. So our plan is to have
Well,
signs.
It would be helpful if, again, you introduced yourself.
Oh, my apologies. Vincent Davis. So our plan is to have signs both north and southbound. The stipulation is due to the proximity of the sign that it be posted going from the southbound side.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Commissioner Schoeneman.
Can you remind me what organization you represent?
So it's New Hampshire Charitable Gaming,
Charitable Gaming.
which includes the River Casino and then the Lucky Moose Casino and Tavern on Goosebell.
Has there been any pushback?
No?
Commissioner Shea.
Could you extend a thanks to James and Sarah Rafferty and the whole organization for all you do for New Hampshire nonprofits? It's,
Absolutely.
really been exceptional for countless in Nashua and beyond, so thank you for that.
Sure thing.
Anyone else? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much, Mr. Davis. All right. We now have item D, Commissioner Schoeneman.
I move to consider the hardship request from Pennachuck Waterworks to excavate in Alt Street to replace aging infrastructure in advance of city paving.
Now, we tabled this.
We did table this last month, yes.
Remember
so
what it is? Does anybody want to be reminded what this is all about?
it-
No, I understand.
this is you want me to give a
Go
brief,
ahead, yeah,
brief
go ahead.
reminder? So this is, Pennachuck wants to replace, I don't know if they want to, but I think they do want to. They want to replace the water main in Rita Street, and we want them to ahead of our paving of Rita Street. But it requires cutting into Ald Street in order to make the connection, and we had recently, well, back in October of 2020, we had paved Ald Street. So that's the ask was to, you know, if we would allow them to cut into Ald Street to do the work in Rita Street. As was explained last time, Rita Street is in fairly poor condition. The effort to reconstruct is a reclaim, so it's fallen to a level of a category that we're going to end up grinding it up and replacing it. Whether that's done this year, next year, the following year, it's going to be the same treatment. As was described, usually we want to try to catch roads before they fall into a worse category and it costs more, but this one's already in the worst category, so to speak. So I think we tabled it to give the board an opportunity to review Rita if they wanted and decide if, you know, how they felt about it and what they wanted to do about it. Pete Tedder from Pennachuck is here. If anybody has any questions about the water
Now,
main itself.
my recollection of the context is that Pennachuck has a lot of projects to do, and they could do Rita Street or they could do another street. They'll eventually get to Rita Street, one way or the other. I don't know, I looked over there. Rita Street is in bad shape, but it's already in reclamation, so we're not going to lose money if we delay the project, Rita. Ald Street is fantastic. I mean, it is. Like it's like a main collector street. You drive the length of the thing, and it's perfect for, I don't know, a mile and a half? I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
I don't, you know, to me, it's a shame. I mean, you know, many times it involves a family that needs a connection, or there's some project that will bring in a lot of taxes or something. In this case, there's no cost associated with delay, and to me, it would be a shame under these circumstances to cut into Ald Street. We could just, Pennachuck will work somewhere else and come back to Rita in a couple of years or something. Commissioner Schoeneman.
I agree with Mr. Mayor. The question here isn't, is Rita Street in bad shape? Is their water not very nice? That's not the question. The issue here is that Ald Street is a brand-new road. And by digging into Ald Street, you know, just a year after it was paved, we reduced the life of that street by something like 30%. So it's not a hardship. I don't feel like I can support this. I think that it can be done a different way. So I won't be supporting that.
Commissioner Shea.
I know you presented to us last month, but I'd welcome in kind of any sort of case to be made in favor of this. If there is still interest to move forward, if so, then why? And if not, and not approving this as an acceptable outcome for tonight's meeting, you know, I'd like to know that is the case.
I think I've addressed the road condition part of it, so maybe I'll ask Pete Tedder to speak to the water line, which is really probably the other issue to consider.
Good evening. Pete Tedder, Distribution Engineering Manager at Pennachuck Waterworks. Rita Street came up on radar for us because it was part of the paving program, and we knew it needed to be replaced. It's if the paving is delayed, it doesn't hurt our schedule. We're going to move just up the street to Nye Ave, where we have another similar water main that needs replaced. And on Nye Ave, we don't have to go into Ald Street. At some point or another, the valve on Nye Ave was bad. We replaced it and stubbed all the way out of Ald Street with that stub. So we can tackle Nye Ave and still accomplish what we're trying to accomplish here.
So just to confirm, from both a paving schedule standpoint and water replacement, line replacement schedule, not moving forward with this is acceptable in both cases? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Alderman O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is more to the Pennachuck, if I may. Reeder Street, is that just domestic distribution, or is there a fire distribution as to a fire hydrant? And is there tuberculation in that particular line, or you anticipate tuberculation in that line, restricting fire flows that, besides, I'm sure the toilets will flush, but a 2,000 GPM pumper, I think we also need to weigh that balance, too.
Right. Reeder Street is domestic supply only. I believe there's 3 houses served off that small water main. It actually doesn't even go through to the adjoining street to the east. It's just a dead-end main. For domestic purposes, we haven't gotten any complaints over there. So we suspect it'll last the duration of time we need it to last.
Anyone else? All right, so the motion was, what, to approve this?
It's to consider.
To
I don't know what that
consider,
means.
oh yes,
To
to
approve.
consider, which means to approve. I
Okay.
assume.
I'm new here.
What?
I'm new here.
Yes. So a yes vote means we go ahead, a no vote means we delay this project. All right, all those in favor of the project say aye. All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
All right, so the motion is declined, and we will defer the project.
Very good.
All right, item F. I think we're back to, oh, sorry, item E, sorry. Commissioner Moriarty.
The motion is to consider a hardship request from Crimson Properties LLC to excavate in Concord Street to install gas and water connections.
I'll just, I'll have the engineer for the project speak to it, because
Okay, thank
he has all the details for you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of the board. For the record, my name is Tom Zajac. I'm a civil engineer with Hayner Swanson, 3 Congress Street here in Nashua. Here tonight representing Crimson Properties, property located at 115 Concord Street. With me here tonight is Mr. Randy Termel from Crimson Properties, as well as Attorney Morgan Hollis, Gottesman and Hollis. I'd just like to provide a quick background, a little bit of the technical information, and then turn things over to Attorney Hollis to speak to the hardship request here this afternoon. So we're here tonight, this afternoon, regarding 115 Concord Street. It's a redevelopment of existing church property into a 12-unit housing for older persons, or 62-plus age-restricted development, to be known as Covington Place. It includes a 10-unit townhouse-style building, along with a duplex building and a clubhouse. The project was approved by the Planning Board last May of 2021, and construction commenced this fall, 2021. I'm sorry, last fall. As part of the design, our team paid careful attention to try to avoid or minimize any impacts to Concord Street, being that it was paved in November of 2018, and the 5-year moratorium expires in November of 2023, or next year. These efforts included maintaining the existing driveway location that serviced the church for the new development, reusing existing utility services that were on site or outside of the roadway where possible, as well as providing new utility service connections outside of the roadway, such as sewer, drainage, power, and telecommunications. We were able to do that on our side of the street without impacting the roadway. With regards to water, there was only an existing 1-inch service for the church. They did not have fire protection on site. So we're working with Pennachuck Waterworks to use this line as a temporary service for the duplex building, which is now under construction, until the new service can be brought into the site. That existing service will then be used on a permanent basis for irrigation, so we don't have to go back out in the street to disconnect that. During the design, we did meet with representatives from Pennachuck to explore options to connect into the existing 24-inch main, which is located on the opposite side of Concord Street. And one of the things we looked at was trying to do a directional bore under Concord Street to the opposite side and tie into a lateral as a way to not impact the roadway. For a couple different reasons, this approach turned out not to be feasible, including that in order to do a directional bore underneath the existing gas main, we would need to do pavement cores in the road, which would put us before this board anyway for a street impact. And those cores would be needed to determine the existing depth of the main. More recently, our client learned that the existing 1-inch service may or may not be able to provide the necessary water pressure needed to service the duplex building on a temporary basis. With regards to the gas, there's an 8-inch gas main on the opposite side of Concord Street. We did attempt to work with Liberty to reuse the existing gas service that serviced the church, but upon further coordination, it was determined that a new main connection would be needed to be brought into the site. So really, we need water and gas services. Therefore, our final site plans did reflect a street cut in order to provide these new services for the development. Regarding the timing, so we're here before you in March seeking approval for this work, but would propose, if we were granted approval, would not implement these impacts until October of this year. So the reason for that is if we were lucky enough to get approval here tonight to extend those services into the development, it would allow for the 10-unit project to move forward and for a little bit of clarity with regards to the overall project timing, construction. As you all know, construction pricing is unpredictable. There are also other elements of the project that would be able to come into a little more focus. There was the developer had proposed a bus stop to be constructed completely separate from the planning board approval. It was something that they brought to the table, and so if we were given more clarity in terms of the timing of the utilities, that would also allow us to kind of bring that into sharper focus. We are working with planning and transit staff on the final design and location of that bus stop. So as proposed, we would seek to make this street impact in October. We would make the utility connection. The temporary patch would go in the fall, and then we would come back first thing in the spring and do the full final restoration, including the curb-to-curb overlay, which we think is good timing in terms of instead of rushing to get it done. As you know, that temporary patch needs some time to settle, so we would get that over the winter months. I'd also just like to point out from a technical perspective, I'm sure you're all familiar with your ordinance as it relates to the standard trench patch and what is needed during a moratorium impact in terms of the overcut and the mill and overlay across from curb to curb. So comparing our request here tonight, which would be to allow this work to proceed in October with the full restoration curb to curb, comparing that to waiting till the moratorium expires a year later. You know, I from a technical perspective, it's my opinion that would allowing for the curb-to-curb restoration, the wide and overcut, would really give the city a better product in the end when comparing those two. I know there's a year time difference there, but just thought I would mention that as well. So thank you for your time. I'd just like to turn it over to Attorney Hollis to discuss the specifics with the hardship request. Thank you.
Pardon? Anybody have questions of? Yes, Commissioner Shea.
So I kind of understand the nature of this and why it's needed and appreciate that new housing will be coming to Nashua. I mean, that's one of the top things that we should all be focusing on in these bodies. And the bus stop item just piqued my interest, so I'm curious. Is this a covered bus stop? What's being proposed? And I'll just couch that with, you know, I drive up Amherst Street and live in French Hill, and you know, seeing bus stops that are not sheltered for a lot of people that need to get to work or are coming to the park to enjoy themselves, and the rain comes in. It's very unfortunate to see. So I'm just interested in a little more detail on that piece.
Sure. Happy to provide what I know, which is not a lot at this point. Okay. The idea, we did meet with planning and transit staff first to figure out if we had enough room in the existing shoulder out there on Concord Street, which is, we do. We don't feel like we need to move the curb or impact the road to provide a pull-off. So the idea would be to, there's a concrete sidewalk out there and grass strip now, so we would just be reconstructing the sidewalk to be along the curb to provide a landing and, area where folks could get onto the bus, and then a concrete pad with this really three-sided bus shelter. The specifics of the shelter, I don't know. I don't think they've been fully thought through yet. What we communicated is Mr. Turmel would be, paying for this. It would be on his dime, and so the idea would be to try to meld the aesthetics, the architecture in this small three-sided structure that would have a roof on it to there's some stone walls associated with the development as well as some of the architectural features. So it wouldn't be the standard bus shelter that you may see that would come from more federal spending.
Okay. And if I may.
Go ahead.
And just to clarify, so the nature of kind of that piece of the conversation is relative to the fact that the sidewalk itself will also be disturbed as you're kind of accessing the underground space, and so in tandem with replacing and repairing what's disturbed, you're looking at adding that feature. Is that right?
So I mentioned the bus stop as it's a potential element to the overall project. We would not be impacting the street. We're not moving the curb line. It's completely separate from the request before you here tonight. The water and gas are located opposite of the driveway to minimize impact. So we would get more clarity in terms of the overall timing of the project, the bus stop itself, but it's not directly tied to this request. There would be no impact to the street.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any other questions? Yes, Commissioner Schoeneman.
Do I understand right that if you are able to cut into Concord Street in the fall, that you'll be able to connect all the utilities that you want and need to get into the development at that time, all at once?
Correct. Water and gas.
Water
Everything
and
else
gas.
will be in already.
Okay. It sounds like you've done your due diligence here, that you tried to work around cutting in the street, but can't really get around it. Is that correct?
Agreed, yes.
Yeah.
Any other questions? I think
Thank you.
Mr. Hollis wanted to address the hardship.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Chairman, members of the board. For the record, my name is Morgan Hollis. I'm an attorney at Gottesman & Hollis, 39 East Pearl Street in Nashua, representing Crimson Properties, LLC, who's Mr. Tamel is here this evening, and I think it sounds like the board has sort of grasped the issue. I thought it was important that you hear from the technical side first, because the first question I had to the client is, why wasn't this thought out a little bit better? But you've heard the history here, which was in the first instance, there was a belief that we might be able to connect with the neighbor, with the existing water and the existing gas. So that was the initial process going through the zoning board, leading up to the site plan process. Then the second analysis, you found out we could do that with the water, but we could not do that with the gas. So the alternative to the gas connection is propane tanks, which might work for a couple of years. And that was sort of the thought process. Build the first 2 units, which are right up against Congress Street, maybe some propane, probably defer a little bit on the 10 units in the back. And remember, these are 62 and up, age-restricted housing. Then we investigated into, can we connect up with the neighbor, which is the law firm at 111, in that they have service. And we thought that was going to work, and that didn't work out. Then we said, we'll just move forward with the Pennachuck connection and try to figure out another way to get under the street. And you've heard the story. We tried to look into directional, and one of the problems with directional is that's Concord Street, and there are an awful lot of utilities, former trolley tracks, so there's a lot of tangled mess in there, if you will, underneath the street, and that is really not the proper way to go. So it then brought us to, well, what's the proper way to do this? And it's really to make a cut and to go across Concord to tie in properly on the other side on both Pennachuck with the new line and Liberty Utilities. If it's not granted, we have to wait. It's likely going to be, from here, it's a year and a half. If we get into the end of the 5-year moratorium, it's really talking about November, which means, depending on the weather, you might not get a cut in then, and you're probably going to be in April. So you're talking about a 2-year delay. Could we put the building that's under construction now, the 2 units in? You could, with the propane and with the 1.5-inch Pennachuck, but what we did find out from Pennachuck is we'll let you tie in there, but we can't guarantee there's going to be adequate pressure. This is a 62 and up, age restricted, not the right way to do it. So we think that there's a hardship. We don't think we imposed it on ourselves. It's just kind of the way things worked out. We were scheduling it as we saw it, and then here we are. We've done all the due diligence, and there really isn't any other way to do this other than to cut fully across Concord. As Tom said, we actually think it's okay, a positive thing for the city, but that's your ultimate decision. As you know, the construction under the moratorium, if we're allowed to go forward, is a different type than a straight trench cut. We think if we can do it in the fall, that will allow this settlement over the winter time, which oftentimes does occur, and then they'll come back and have a better patch in the spring. So that's our timing. We'd like to do it in the fall, and that's our permission. We think we actually do have a legitimate hardship, and otherwise you're going to end up with probably not the best ideal situation. We're going to have a project that maybe we started a little prematurely before we finalized everything. But we knew we could get 2 in there, and we still can. And it's not really what the city wants. We need that housing, and I think it'll be a good cut because we have 2 utilities supervising this thing. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions or comments? Commissioner Schoeneman.
I have to agree with everything you said. It was my own thought that I think you've tried hard to do this without cutting into Concord. And I'm obviously not in favor of cutting into roads that are young, especially Concord Street, which takes a lot of traffic. It is going to be messy. But by the time it goes through, it'll be 4 years out of the 5 in the moratorium. We badly need senior housing. And if you can get it all done and patched before winter and not have to cut into the street again, I think it's probably good to go ahead and do it now. So I would be in support of it.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Commissioner Moriarty.
Attorney Ellis, I was just wondering, when you're before the planning board, does the moratorium come up when we're planning this? Or, because I know the engineer's probably at these meetings, right? Okay, there we go, thank you.
Yeah, it absolutely comes up. So engineering reviews all those development plans, and we bring it up in our comments, bring it up in the board. Usually we make them add a note to the plans. The planning board approval and this approval aren't necessarily tied, so that's one thing it'd be great if everybody came here first, but that doesn't always happen. Sometimes they go through the planning board process. We warn them what they're going to have to do or what approvals they're going to need, and so then they have to come here. So it is discussed, but we can't make people do this first, unfortunately, which would be nice in some cases.
In my opinion, that's where the breakup is there's not enough communication between planning and this group here. There should be. I mean, now they got their approval by the plan to go ahead, so construction starts, and now boom, now we got to hook up gas. Oh, yeah. Come before us. I mean, I think it's the process could be improved.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't like putting the board in that position where there's an approved plan and now you're the last step in the process. So I fully understand that, and we'll do what we can with planning to try to improve that process.
I'm here first.
I mean, every month we're going through these hardships. It's like, there's got to be a better way, Mayor.
Well, we might be able to propose something, but yes, point taken, so to speak.
I had one other point that my client just fairly recently learned, and that is when you make a connection in the building that you're constructing for Liberty Utilities, there is a 9-month window when you have to connect up to the actual main line. So that wasn't known at the time. The planning board, in this instance, the plan went forward knowing full well that we would, there's a moratorium on Concord Street. It wasn't anticipated we would be here. As I said, there was going to be a temporary scenario where we do all the construction, maybe have propane tanks. You could do propane for the whole thing if you wanted to on a temporary basis, but you'd have all the piping in. Then when the moratorium was done, you'd go out. We thought we could connect up to the existing water main. That isn't going to work. So those situations were not predictable at the time. And then to find out that once you put in all of the infrastructure in your building, you have a 9-month window, and if you don't connect up, the money is on you, right? If you connect up, then Liberty Utilities pays for the connection. But if you don't, it's on you. So here we could construct these buildings, put all the infrastructure in, wait for the moratorium to lift, and it's going to cost a significant sum, which obviously adds to the cost of the building and either rental or sale price. But that's just an additional factor. It does help explain. In this instance, we were all aware of the moratorium. It's just we felt that it was another way around it, 3 ways around it, and they all struck out. And this is really the proper way to do it.
I mean, I think that's a great point you just made, even though you didn't think it was important. To me, that's important, that there's an extra cost involved there if you don't connect at the time, that you have to come back and connect. I wasn't aware of that the cost is then on the developer.
Yeah,
So
and
that's a hardship case that I can...
I have the email here that, if you would like it, but my client sent it to me, and I said, that was an unknown factor. A little-known factor, wasn't known to me, actually. So I think, I understand why Liberty does it. They don't like to have these things hanging out there where they've done it, paid for it, and it's not happening. They're not getting the gas revenues from it. Thank you.
All right, anything else? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next is item F. Commissioner Shea.
The motion is to consider the hardship request from Liberty Utilities to excavate in Chapman Street and Cody Avenue to install gas mains.
Along the hardship train here, we have another one. As described, this is for Liberty to make some gas main improvements. This is part of a larger project where they could abandon 2,800 feet of leak-prone gas main on Lake Street and Euclid Avenue, but it requires cutting into Chapman and Cody Ave. They were both paved in 2018, so again, about 4 years old pavement. And I believe we have Liberty here to address questions, or maybe on the line.
I have a question. Just
Yes.
where is Chapman and Cody? What part of the city?
It's off, it's on the other side of the highway, East Dunstable.
Oh, okay.
It's,
Right,
not describing it very well.
All right, is Liberty on here? Are you on by Zoom or?
Hello, yes, I've called in. My name is Brad Marks. I work for Liberty. I'm the manager of the gas engineering department. I can answer any questions.
All right, now, it's a little, you're pretty faint. Your voice is pretty faint. We're having a little trouble hearing. I don't know if you can improve that in any way.
Okay, does this sound any better?
Yeah.
A little better, yeah.
Okay. If I need to introduce myself again, my name's Brad Marks. I work for Liberty Utilities. I'm the manager of the gas engineering department.
Okay, and we're looking at this exemption at Cody and Chapman, or this hardship
Correct,
request.
Yep.
Can you speak to the need for it?
Yeah, so the idea of this project, there is currently 3 services at the east end of Chapman Street that are on our low-pressure system. And we have a project to basically, our goal is to abandon a significant amount of low-pressure main by making all the services in this area high pressure. And the one area in here, we would like to extend some high pressure along Chapman Street to the end of Chapman Street on the east side, so we can get all the services to high pressure, which will allow us to abandon a significant amount of low pressure main, much of which is considered leak prone. This has arisen because Lake Street showed up on a paving list, which I believe the city will try to pave probably in 2023, is what I was told.
All right. Now, if you can hear us, there might be questions, but anybody have questions or comments? Commissioner Schoeneman.
I think once again, this is why we need to address these things on a case-by-case basis, because this is not a very young street. Chapman Street is a dead-end street, I believe, just after Cody Avenue. I don't think it's as high traffic as Concord or Amherst. So I think that installing the gas main while they can wouldn't be so detrimental to the traffic and the road in that area. So I would be okay with supporting this. Thank you.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Now we will move on to item G. Commissioner Lemon.
Motion is to consider the hardship request from Liberty Utilities to excavate in Amherst Street for the installation of a gas main.
And can the Liberty representative address this request, please?
So yes, we have a project on Amherst Street between Bennett Street and this one heads east about 1,500 feet with tying connections on each end. You know, this, and the anticipation here is that Amherst, kind of similar to Lake, we were told by the city would potentially get paved possibly next year. And because of the amount of work on this street, we wanted to get a year ahead of this. The hang up here is that it looks like when Broad Street was paved in 2019, it looks like the intersection of Amherst Street and Bennett Street was also paved over. And unfortunately, we need to make a tying connection in that intersection. So that is the need for this request here, to excavate in that intersection that looks like it was paved when Broad Street was paved.
All right. Comments? Anyone? Commissioner Schoeneman.
Broad Street was paved in 2019, and Amherst Street as well. It's a young street, very young, very high traffic. That area's, it would be a big mess. And to put a hole in Amherst Street at that spot would be extremely messy. And I think that it's part of a routine gas main replacement. I would not be in favor of this hardship request.
I'm sorry, could I just respond to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Amherst Street was paved, but it not the section that we're mostly looking to work in. Amherst Street was paved from Broad Street heading north. The only section where we need to make a connection is at Bennett. right where it looks like the paving was stopped, the limit of the paving from 2019, I believe it was 20, or I think it was from when Broad Street was paved. But in either case, the section of Main that we're replacing, or looking to replace, is from Bennett Street to Mitchell Street. That section, I do not believe is under moratorium right now, aside from the intersection of Bennett.
So how old is the road, the part of the road that they want to cut into, if that's the case?
Did you hear that question?
I did. I can try and look up.
Do you know,
probably,
Mr.?
Yeah, it's.
I don't know off the top of my head.
I believe it's as drafted in the staff memo here. It's July of 2019. As was described, this is kind of a limit of a number of paving projects. As you pave two intersections, sometimes we carry it through. When we do pave Amherst Street, we're likely to, go back in and cover up this area. So if this is approved, we probably would work out an arrangement with Liberty where rather than do that mill and overlay themselves, we would probably take a contribution and extend our paving project to go the additional 40 feet to cover that area up. So it's something that, we can possibly work with them on, but it is at the limit of all this paving on a couple different streets and is new pavement, but again, it's at the very end of a paving run.
Any other questions or discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion passes. We now have, next one is item H, Commissioner Schoeneman.
I move to consider the hardship waiver request from Liberty Utilities to excavate in moratorium streets for grade 2 gas leak repairs through calendar year 2022.
So I can quickly introduce this. Last couple years, Liberty Utilities has come in and asked for an approval, basically a blanket approval, so to speak, for a calendar period to be able to make leak repairs. There's different grades of leaks. Grade 1 being the most severe requires emergent action. We had some of those on Broad Street. They need to go out and do that work right away. Grade 2 is less significant, but still under PUC regulations are required to repair it within 6 months or within the same calendar year of discovery of the leak. What this request enables them to do is to respond more quickly to making those repairs, and that's why they've asked for it. In our agendas, we always, as an informational, one of the final items, we always report what permits were issued in moratorium street. So you get the information of it being, of the work having been completed, but wouldn't necessarily get the opportunity to review these individually for separate approvals. I don't know if anybody has any questions for Liberty representative on this.
Questions, comments? Commissioner Schoeneman.
I'd just like to comment that this has come up before, and in general, the board hasn't really been in favor of a blanket approval for the reasons that we just saw. A case-by-case basis is really the best way to deal with these things, and if they have 6 months or within the calendar year to address these leaks, which are not emergencies, then I think it's perfectly reasonable to ask them to come and show why they have hardship for the sake of the roads and the paving project, which we've spent so much taxpayer money on to have good streets. So I am not in favor of this.
Commissioner Shea.
As a decision maker at this body, I don't know that I want to be responsible for determining which gas leaks we are approving the repair of and which ones we are not approving the repair of. For that reason, I'll be in favor of this.
Alderman O'Brien.
hate to interject, but I've had some minor experience with this. Gas is treated with mercaptan. It's an odorant because natural gas isn't really, it's odorless. People smell it, and they'll call the fire department.
Yep.
And they'll come down and determine, and it'll get constantly reported, and I've seen that throughout my career, that until the leak is mitigated, and then you're going to have to decide when you reach that point, but when a 2 turns into a 1, and that's the issue at hand, so.
Any other comments? Commissioner Moriarty.
Engineer Hudson, I think we just started doing this last year, this blanket, is my recollection. I mean, we used to have it individual, and then...
Maybe I'm wrong, but we definitely did it last year, but
Yeah.
I believe we may have done it the year before as well. I think both years they came in about this time of year and asked for approval through the end of the calendar year.
And has there been any problems from your standpoint?
No, I mean, so they're still permitted by us. I mean, we go through the same process. It's just the board doesn't have the advanced notice of it or the opportunity to approve it. But as I said, these are leaks that they're required to repair. I mean, they really have no choice but to repair them. So should you vote no, I think they're still probably going to have to repair it. I don't know how that would come to be, but that, I think that was the thought process. Since they're going to have to do it, might as well let them do it as quickly as they can, and then report back to you that it was done. So.
Commissioner Schoenman.
Remind me, the grade 2 leak is something, you said there are 6 months. It's not an emergency. It's 6 months. They have or till the end of the calendar year to address the leak, whereas a grade 1 is an emergency.
That's my understanding. Liberty representative could probably speak better to it, but yes, if they find one on December 1st, they have to fix it by December 30.
Yeah, it's by the end of the 6 months or the end of the year.
If they find it in June, they have till the end of the year. So it's, I'm sure they like to replace them or fix them as quickly as they can. But yeah, that's my understanding that that's a requirement. It's 6 months, but within the same calendar year, regardless of when they find it.
Who determines whether
And
it's
I'll just say, Mr. Hudson is correct in his description of the difference between a grade 1 and a grade 2.
Go ahead.
Who determines the severity of the leak, the grade of the leak?
I defer to Liberty on that because I know they have sensing equipment. I don't know how they determine which is which.
We do based on, the Liberty Utilities does, based on regulations and standards. There's certain criteria that would make a leak a grade 1 versus a grade 2.
Commissioner Shea.
I'd just like to further add that the time it would take to come before us, schedule, to get on the agenda and come and see us is time where these leaks could be repaired. And with natural gas, the primary constituent is methane, which is a greenhouse gas that goes straight to atmosphere. If I understand correctly, it's like 10 times more potent than I'm sorry, trying to think of what the other, but in any case, it's 10 times more powerful than CO2 in terms of retaining heat as a greenhouse gas. And so for that reason, that's another motivator in terms of why I think there's some urgency in this, not just from like a technical and safety standpoint on the ground, but on a global level.
All right, anyone else? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay?
Motion passes. Thank you. Now we're on to
Thank you.
item I. Commissioner Moriarty.
Motion is to award the construction contract for the 2022 sewer replacement project to SUR Construction West, Inc. of West Chester, New Hampshire, in the amount of $2,150,000 $135,950, contingent upon bond approval. Funding will be through Department 169 wastewater, fund, bond, activity, sewer rehab.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is our annual sewer dig contract. It's intended to replace about 4,000 lineal feet of sewer mains this year. The memo lists the streets. I won't read them in the interest of time. And so that it would include that work in addition to including other work that we may find through that CCTV work. We could use the unit prices in this contract to go do that work. So as noted, 4 bids were received on February 10th. The lower bidder was Jennings Excavation. We reviewed their bid. They're a good local contractor, but there's a couple bid items that we had questions on. We met with them. After discussing with them, they requested to withdraw their bid, which we agreed to do both in the best interest of the city and them. So we're proposing to award here to the second low bidder, SUR Construction West, who did our work the list last year and has done a good job. I'd be happy to address any questions.
Commissioner Shea.
So do I understand correctly that some of like the relining is part of this project here, is that right?
This is just digging and replacing pipe and structures. It's actually the physical replacement. The lining is a separate contract.
Okay, thank you.
But if we find a section of collapsed pipe, we would call SUR in, they replace that section, and then we can line the rest of the pipe. That's what happens sometimes. Sometimes the whole pipe's bad enough that you gotta dig up and replace the whole pipe.
Thank you. It's not necessarily germane because I understand that the relining is kind of like a separate thing, but while I'm thinking about it, I'm just curious if you know much in terms of the off-gassing that happens with the relining. And forgive me if I've asked this before, I think about it all the time whenever I drive by one of those operations. It seems to be a particularly noxious fume, like it chokes you up as you're going by. I can't imagine that it's good. And I wonder if there's anything that can be done to kind of mitigate that going out into the air, and if you know more about that process.
It's a question that's come up many times from the public and board members. We actually created a page on our website which describes in better detail exactly what the particulates are. It's primarily steam, but then there are some chemicals that you can smell because the liner is a chemical material, basically a plastic type material. So I would encourage you to visit that, or I can come back and bring that detail. I don't have that tonight. But we did prepare that document to try to help anybody go learn more about the process. It has been studied and continues to be studied. It's been determined it's not a health hazard unless you're exposed for a period of time up close type of thing. Just driving by quickly, you're not gonna, you may smell it, but it's not a hazardous condition.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, if you could email that to the board, that'd be appreciated. I don't need you to come and
Sure.
you spend a lot of time with us, so thank you.
For sure.
And I just have a general question. When you're
Commissioner
thank you. When you're going through the sewer stuff, do you approach the city as a grid? Do you, I'm sure you get all kinds of problem reports, but you know where things are, but then do you just go, section by section of the city when you determine to redo pipe?
No, the downtown is the oldest section of sewer. A lot of them are brick, and actually the bricks fared fairly well. So no, it kind of has tended to be more central part of the city out, kind of mirroring how development occurred over time. In our GIS systems, we are able to see the pipes, and it has material type and age, and we go through a screening process. Of course, we're doing the paving programs, so we're also looking at pipes that are under streets that are going to be paved, just like all the other utilities. So it's quite an extensive process that we go through to screen which pipes are going to be looked at first.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, anyone else? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. Next, we have item J. Commissioner Shea.
The motion is to approve the engineering services contract amendment with Hayner Construction, Hayner Swanson, Inc. of Nashua, New Hampshire, in the amount of $227,300 for the management of construction administration of the pavement program. Department 160 Admin Engineering Fund Bond Activity Paving.
So this is support services for the paving program. We have a fairly extensive paving program this year. We're doing 14 miles of roadway. Hayner Swanson's a local engineering company. They provide engineering support, field inspection report to us, kind of as an extension of our staff. That's what this is. The paving program was previously approved, so this is some of the support services to support that. Next month, we'll be bringing in, I think, a testing contract to do the asphalt testing work. That's part of that too. So be happy to address any questions.
Anyone? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We have an informational item K. Any comments there? Informational item L. Any comments there? Commissioner Schoeneman.
So this is the informational item, outdoor dining draft ordinance. There's been a lot of discussion about the placement of the barriers, and we don't, as board, don't really have a lot of say in approval or disapproval of this ordinance. Is it more appropriate to speak about it during commissioner comments, or may I speak my mind?
Well, I'm about to say go ahead. Now, but there's once you're through, I think we've got to think about suspending the rest of the agenda because we have a meeting at 6 out of Riverside, and
Yes.
we should do the non-public session because it involves a couple of personnel decisions which need to be made, hopefully not delayed a month. So I would suggest that we entertain Commissioner Schoeneman, and then if it's okay with the board, we suspend the rest of the agenda and come back to that next time.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
If I could be so bold as to ask you to just do item M, which was the additional one we snuck in there. It's a poll petition.
All right, we could do
Straightforward,
M.
and we get
But
that
anyway,
approved.
why doesn't Commissioner Schoeneman go ahead, or we can, go ahead, so go ahead.
I'll be very brief. I fail to see why, when the intent is to bring revenue from people utilizing the downtown, the plan is to snarl traffic, uglify the city, and alienate many businesses for the sake of extending outdoor dining, which didn't exist before COVID. The businesses that are saying that they need the extended outdoor dining to survived before COVID. They survived during the winter. I fail to see why we need to spend $80,000 a year to create a mess, and not a very pretty one, in the downtown area. For the sake of extending, outdoor dining is going to exist. It's great, people love it. But why do we need to do something like this to the downtown area that just, it's not attractive at all. I don't believe, I've never seen the numbers that it really brings in extra revenue. I would be interested to see the numbers, but why do it, and why do it for 3 years? I'd like to know the rationale, but for the sake of brevity, I would just like to express that this ordinance is not, it's a joke. it's not, whatever the motivation behind it is, it's not bringing a lot of revenue. The motivation can't be, it doesn't make sense that the motivation can be to bring a lot of revenue to the downtown area. That's all.
Well, now that's a longer discussion. And
This is the only time I have.
yes, I understand that. And
voice
I think
that.
we'd be glad to discuss it if we didn't have this other thing pending. But I think there's, I guess briefly, even briefer than you, I think there's a lot of evidence that it brings in additional revenue. But you should look at some of the public comment from restaurants and other businesses that have been given at various times before infrastructure. There's now this task force. And the presentations that have been done. I mean, there's more information there. But I don't think we should debate what the Aldermen have been debating for hours right now. Thank you, though, for the comments. Could we go to item M, which Mr. Hudson was just asking about?
I would move to approve the following poll license petition, PSNH number 21-1613.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion passes. Now, I would like, if you don't mind, we will suspend, if there's, without objection, let me say that, we will suspend the rest of the agenda and come back to it next time so that we can make the 6 o'clock meeting. We need a few minutes to do the personnel items, rest of the agenda except for the non-public personnel items, which we really need to,
It's pretty self-explanatory.
which we need to
I don't know
address.
if
But
you want it back, to bring it back.
What?
Do you want me to bring it to the next meeting? It's pretty self-explanatory, most of it. And I will email you my director's report with comments, and then this is also on Channel 16 and on Facebook, so.
But we'll have the snow plowing
But we'll
budget
have-
on the agenda in case people have questions or whatever. Okay, so now why don't we go to the non-public session, and I believe Commissioner Moriarty.
And Mr. Mayor, I'll beg off and I'll hold a seat for everybody up there.
Yeah,
Okay.
Alderman
We-
O'Brien needs to be there as
We
well.
probably need to unseal the non-public minutes for the two personnel, but we may need to just do that quickly, Mayor.
All right, so let's go to the motion under Personnel
B.
B. So there's a motion to unseal the minutes. Commissioner Moriarty.
I don't know if I have that motion, I'm sorry.
I don't think I have
It's
it.
on the goldenrod agenda.
It's the last page.
It's the last page, motion B. Somebody can read it.
Yes, I move to approve and unseal the non-public minutes for two personnel non-public meetings from the Board of Public Works of February 24, 2022.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We now will go into, we have a motion on non-public session. Commissioner Moriarty.
I move by roll call that the board go into non-public session pursuant to RSA 91-A3, Roman numeral 2B, the hiring of any person as a public employee.
All right, and I believe we need to do that by roll call, correct?
Yes.
Any discussion? Could you please call the
Yes.
roll?
Commissioner Moriarty?
Yes.
Commissioner Shoneman?
Yes.
Commissioner Lemon?
Yes.
Commissioner Shea?
Yes.
Mayor Dodges?
Yes. So we will go into non-public, and please turn off the video. And there is no need for a motion to seal in this case, right?
Correct.
All right, so the next motion would be to adjourn. Commissioner Moriarty.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that the board adjourn.
All right, the motion is to adjourn the meeting of March 24th. Works, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting is adjourned at 4:43 PM. See you all at Riverside in...
No, we're going to North.
Oh, excuse me, to North,
Don't go to Riverside.
Nashua North. We'll see you.